Why do we love stories so much? Everybody loves stories. Kids, adults, people from every culture. I mean, there's $1 trillion industry that basically just sells stories. But what is it about them? They help us explore life and understand things in a deeper way. They move us, they make us think. About half the Bible is narrative, half the Bible is story. And even the parts that aren't stories in the Bible, they're connected to stories in the Bible. When we're reading a story in the Bible, are there any unique things we need to keep in mind as we try to understand them? Here are a few tips for reading narrative. First is to ask what the main point of the story is. It can be really tempting to zero in on a detail that you're curious about or you think is interesting or confusing, but it helps to start by asking, what's the whole story about? Another tip is to remember that the hero is always God. Okay, there may be human characters that are the focus of the story, but in the Bible, the ultimate hero is God. He's the central focus in the big picture. That means the human characters may or may not automatically be good guys. They might not be people you're supposed to imitate or admire. They might be doing something else, and you're really supposed to say, what is God up to in this story? Third tip is to sort out the difference between what is descriptive and prescriptive. Here's what I mean by that. Sometimes there are things that the Bible is simply describing what happened. Not saying it's good or bad or otherwise. And it doesn't mean that you're supposed to do that sort of thing in your life. You might actually read some things in the Bible that seem really troubling and you say, is this okay for me to do? Maybe even one of the people that you consider a good guy or a hero in the Bible might be doing something that you say, this doesn't seem right. But then there are things that are prescriptive. Things that the reason they're there is to say, you should act like this. This is something that ought to be the same in your life. You should imitate this. And sorting out the difference between what is descriptive and prescriptive is really, really helpful with stories. How do you know the difference between those two? Oftentimes, the narrator will make a comment saying whether or not this was good or bad. Or perhaps God will actually make a comment and say, this is what I think about that. Other times there are little clues in the story that give you hints that you're supposed to think good or bad about someone's actions. Or there might be other places in the Bible that say, when this comes up, that's a good thing or that's a bad thing. But you got to think through what's descriptive and what's prescriptive. Well, let's dig into another passage of the Bible, another story. It's in Luke chapter 8, verses 40 through 66. I'll give you a moment to go ahead and find it. Once again, Luke is in the New Testament. I'm going to walk through the steps of comma once again, and for each step, I'm going to give you a chance to try it out first, and then I'll tell you how I did that step. Let's start with context. Now, we've been in Luke a little bit in previous videos, so you may already know the context of Luke. And when we talk about context, I'll usually give you time to go and either read the intro to a study Bible or to watch the Bible Project video about that book. If you want to do that for Luke, you can do that right now. But since I'm here, I will remind you what we've learned about Luke so far. Luke is a gospel, which means it's a biography of Jesus. The author was a guy named Luke, who was an early follower of Jesus, a friend of Paul, and he was a doctor. He went about interviewing people and investigating eyewitness accounts of what Jesus did, and he wrote them down in this book. The audience for the book is the early church. It's a mix of Jews and Gentiles who would be reading this, people from lots of different backgrounds. And in the context of the book, if you want to know what's going on right before this passage, it's in the middle of Jesus' ministry. He's been traveling around the land of Israel and he's been healing people and teaching people, and people are still trying to figure out what to think about him. The next step is observations. I'm going to read the passage out loud like I've done before, and I want you to follow along with me, and I want you to note the things that you observe. Once again, we're going to put treats on the screen, TRTS, so you have some ideas of things to look for. And remember, you don't have to have it all figured out. When you see a detail or you see something you observe, you don't have to know why you think it's important. Just note it. Maybe mark it in your Bible or on a piece of paper next to your Bible. Let me read the passage now. Luke chapter 8, starting in verse 40. Now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. When a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." While Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," he said. "Don't bother the teacher anymore." Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid. Just believe, and she will be healed." When he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. "Stop wailing," Jesus said. "She's not dead, but asleep." They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and said, "My child, get up." Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astonished, but he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened. I'm going to give you a moment now to read it over again and mark down your own observations. At this point, if you're in a group, pause the video and share your observations with each other. Let me share a few of the things that I observed. Let's start with theme, okay? Once again, we go to the heading of the section, and the heading says this: Jesus raises a dead girl and heals a sick woman. That's kind of the theme of the whole thing, a summary of the whole passage. Let's look for repeated words and ideas here. There's a few of them here. One of the ones I noticed is the crowd is mentioned a bunch of times. It seems like there's a lot of people in this scene. The mention of the woman bleeding is there a few times. And then the idea of touching Jesus comes up. The woman touching Jesus, the crowd touching Jesus. I also noticed the repeated phrase, daughter or my child. Jesus calls the woman daughter. The daughter of Jairus is mentioned. My child is how Jesus addresses the girl. Also notice the word faith and believe, which are related ideas here. What about truths about God? What does this tell us about Jesus? I notice that Jesus is called Master and Teacher by the people here. Those are the titles that are used for Jesus. I also noticed what Jesus did in terms of how he responded to the people. And those are actually some of the things that I found striking. That's the fourth category here. I noticed that it was so striking that Jesus stopped in the middle of the crowd. One person touched him out of all of these different people, and it was so striking that he said, "I want to know who that was. I want to talk with this person." It's also striking that at the end, Jesus can raise the dead. That's a pretty striking thing. I also had a question. Sometimes we say good questions are good observations. So one of my questions was, what's the big deal about the woman bleeding? Why was the woman ashamed? Where are these, what's the reason she was hiding here? Now, those are questions, I'll just tell you this, that you can actually find answers to in the footnote of a good study Bible. There are cultural reasons why this woman might have been ashamed. We're not going to explain them all here, but they're things that you can research for yourself. All right, now we're going to go on to message. This is where you take one of your observations and you ask the question, okay, so what does this mean? How would I summarize this in a sentence or two, a principle that I could apply to my life? And again, you don't have to come up with something, that's really clever or whatever, but I'll give you a couple of minutes to just write something down. At this point, if you're in a group, go ahead and pause and share your messages with each other. Here's my message. Jesus always has time for the one. This is one of the things that I see here, my observation about him stopping and talking to this one woman out of the crowd. I also noticed that it was an interruption. He's got an urgent thing to go do, and yet he still has time for her. Even though it delayed him getting to this girl, he was willing to stop and talk with her and see her face to face. Jesus always has time for the one. The next step is meditation. This is where you take your message and you start to talk with God about it. You pray about it, you ponder it. You say, God, what do you have to say to me about this? And you listen to his response. And maybe something will come to mind, maybe not. But you spend some time slowing down and saying, God, what do you want me to get out of this? I'll give you a minute or two, but if you need longer than that, feel free to take it. The final step is application. This is where we take our message and we ask the question, if this message is true, how should I respond? What does this change for me? Is there something specific I need to do? Maybe even something today, something I should start doing or stop doing, or something that will help me grow in this area. What you want to do is make sure you're getting tangible about what you can do today. I'll give you a minute or so to ponder that and write something down. Now, if you're in a group, this is the point where you should pause and share your applications with each other. Here's my application. I had my message, which was Jesus always has time for the one. And so in light of that, something I could do is to take time to reach out to someone that I think might be forgotten, someone who's going through something hard and they might wonder if people notice. And I've got a few people in mind right now that I could reach out to and text just after this. So that's my application. It's a tangible thing that I can do today in response to this message.